Jack, it's so good to see you, man. I'm excited to have you back on and have these conversations.
Man, thank you so much for having me. I'm bummed that I missed you here in Utah a couple of weeks ago. We had some plane mechanical issues, and I thought it was wind because it was so windy that day you were flying in. So I thought for sure everything's locked down for wind. But
Maybe I'm glad. Maybe it was the best thing that could have happened is that my plane had mechanical issues and I didn't get into the windstorms. Sometimes that plays out.
You know
pretty
how
well
windy
too.
it is here. You can get down there in Salt Lake sometimes. That can get a
Yeah.
little bit dicey on the planes. But what's that background, man? Are you in a new spot or is this the new studio? What do you have back there?
It's the new studio. I'm still in my same place, but we've tried to ramp up production and I'm trying to get the cameras in place and trying to make sure my background keeps up with yours and, all this kind of stuff. So you're building a new studio, aren't you?
That's right. That's right. So it's right outside. It's supposed to be done on January 10th of 2022. So we're a couple months late, but that's just how it goes with things like that, So it's gonna be nice. This will end up being the library in here. Podcast studio will be out there, and then I have a writing space in here that's a little separate from all the chaos of kids and wife and dog and in-laws and all the rest of it. So that'll be good. That'll be. But still,
I know how that goes.
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine I am a writer as well. I'm a published author, not nearly to the degree of success that you have. But that being said, the writing process is very difficult for me. I don't enjoy it. Actually, I think like you do. So we'll talk about that. But even still, I can hear my kids playing and my wife's, asking questions or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know how Jack does it because I can't do it. And I hate it. You know what I mean? So
yeah, you cannot have that going on. I mean, for me anyway. I mean, maybe some people can. I heard Malcolm Gladwell talking one time, and he said that he came up in an era where there were still like sounds when you would type, like in the newsroom, and there was just all this chaos in the background, all this energy in the background. I think now it's a lot quieter. Like I've been in a couple news studios, and like one in particular, one in Canada, and everything was robotic. It was like one person up in you couldn't even see them behind this like glass thing up on another level looking down, but everything else, there was no like person behind the camera. Here in the States, you still get like the people behind the camera, at least 3 or 4, but it's still pretty quiet. And in some of these newsrooms I've been in, there's like seas of desks, but there's not that many people working. And then Malcolm Gladwell said he came up in a day where it was just chaos all around him. And so he likes that when he writes. So he goes to New York coffee shops and he'll write there because of that chaos in the background. I cannot have that. I need uninterrupted time. And even in the house, when I'm getting that uninterrupted time, if you still hear those things like you were talking about, kids playing outside or whatever else, it's still a distraction. I still feel guilty about not being out there with them. But even when I, let's say, go downstairs and want to grab a snack, well, I do that. And because I'm not physically typing on something, then everyone else around thinks, oh, he's not working.
He's done. Yeah, right.
That's not the case. So this last book, I had to rent some Airbnbs here around Park City, and I found this one. Oh my gosh, it was just this log cabin. Everything was set up so efficiently because it was so tiny. It was just a wood burning stove. There's a pile of wood outside I could chop and just toss in that thing. A small couch in front of the wood burning stove, a little table to the other side of it, a little kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, little deck around it. And it was so awesome to have everything right there, because I'd stand up from that kitchen table where I did most of the writing and then walk like 3 steps and I'm in the kitchen. I'm making a sandwich, but I'm still thinking about what I was writing. I'm still trying to solve that problem on the written page, and I'm still thinking and I'm making the sandwich. So I'm still writing, just not because I'm not sitting there typing or sitting there staring at a screen trying to figure it out. Certainly doesn't mean that I'm not working and not writing. So I would make that sandwich or whatever it was I'm thinking, and then I sit back down, boom, right back at it. But I'm never out of that flow. I'm never out of it, never out of the problem. But here at the house, you go downstairs, all of a sudden, oh, he's not typing. Boom, 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 boom. And that's just how it goes. So there's no way around that. That's just how it is in life. So, you can't get mad about it. You just got to rent Airbnbs.
I imagine you as like, Ralph Waldo Emerson, you're sitting in the log cabin by the lake, or I think Ernest Hemingway spent a lot of time in, was it Costa Rica?
Well, Cuba.
Cuba, that's right, Cuba. And so I see, you sitting by the ocean and having this breeze come in and like free of distractions. And that's a good way to do it for sure. It's hard because life is so much more fast paced than it's ever been. And challenging. And we have all sorts of technology, which is wonderful, but it can be a distraction. It's so hard to cut out the noise and the nonsense. And I can't imagine the level at which that comes at you, especially with the level of success that you've had over the past, what, 5, 6 years now?
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, I'm as busy as I was back then because there's no more hours in the day to pack things into. So I was just as busy back then, but I'm still, nothing stopped, there's more of it, but I'm still like, those days are still packed. They were packed back then. They're packed now. I guess there's more to juggle, but there's still the same amount of time to do all that in. There is a place I go on the East Coast that does have that view of the water, very quiet. And so I love going there to write, but usually I go there with the family. So I can only write for very short amounts of time before that chaos comes back, which is wonderful. But those who especially had to work at home during, lockdowns and things like that will probably understand that, hey, when you close that door to an office in your house, it becomes like a magnet for kids and dog. It's like, with that door's open, they could care less. But as soon as that door closes for whatever reason, like it's a magnet for all
we want what we can't have, right? Like, we're always, if we can't have it, that's exactly what I want. I want that thing.
Yeah, that's how it goes. But yeah, things have gotten pretty busy, that's for sure. And this morning, even running up here, it was up for like 6:15 or something, AM radio deal. And then you can't obviously be late for that because it's live. And then getting the kids up out of bed, zipping to school, heading back. Oh, there was snow on the cars this morning. So I'm, out there, brushing everything off, and then get the kids to school a little late, and then boom, home, little coffee, and then right upstairs to jump on this on time. So it's, I feel so fortunate, so fortunate that there are all these things to juggle, and that people are interested in the books and the show and everything else that's happening. So I feel extremely fortunate every day, and just try to take as many opportunities as I can to thank everybody who took a risk on me all those years ago, like you did, and then told a friend, because that's why I can do what I love doing, which is the writing.
Yeah. I have so many questions, like so many questions. I don't know if I'll have enough time today to be able to get through all this, but number one, when you're writing a new book, is In the Blood, is it number 5?
This is five. Crazy.
So yeah, that's wild. And that's 5 in what, 5 years, would you say, roughly?
So to 2018, the first one came out, Terminal List. And then you came up to the house that year, and we sat down for the first podcast, hung out for a bit. And we're in a different place now. We rented for a little bit, which was chaos as well, because the office where I did the podcast, did the writing, did the business, did everything was a closet. And it was, I mean, all that merch was spilling out into the bedroom and the kitchen, the living room. Now that's outsourced, but yeah, it's 2018, and this is the 5th one, and I'm working on the 6th one right now.
I knew you were a different breed when we sat down, we did our podcast. And then before I left, you're like, hey, let me get you some, I think you had just shot an elk, or
I forget what I gave you, but yes.
Did your daughter shoot an elk, or?
Yes, we both did. Or no, that trip, because I remember exactly when it was in 2018, and that was my daughter's elk. Yeah, my daughter just got one.
Yeah.
Actually, I did too. I went a couple months early, so 2 separate trips. I got one, then she got one. Yeah.
I knew you were a different breed. I knew we were kindred spirits. You're like, hey, before you go, let me get you some meat, and you gave me some elk meat. I'm like, okay, that right there, that says everything I need to know about this guy. That was awesome. How long does it take you to write a book on average, from like start to finish? Is that so? For me, for a little bit of context, I published a book in 2017. I've got another one coming out this year. Awesome. For me, like cranking it out, both of those books I wrote in about a 60-day window, and they're 60,000 words each. And I just said, I'm gonna write 1,000 words per day. That's it. But what's your process like when it comes to writing a book?
Well, I wish it was more like that, but it is not. That's fast. That's pretty good. That's dedication right there. You got it done in 60 days. That's amazing. And let's do a podcast when your next one comes out. You can tell me when that is later, so we can release it right around the launch of your next book. That'd be amazing. But so it has to take a year now, because now I'm on a deadline. So now I have a year, and really what happens within that year is up to me. I would like to get more efficient so that I am done months in advance. and get ahead of the game. But with yeah, 3 kids and everything, it's just chaos. But I'm not there yet. That was my goal this year, to get closer. My goal is to get closer to having them done earlier on time. But it takes a year, and I come up with the 1-page executive summary, kind of like a something that tells me, hey, do I want to spend the next year of my life working on this thing? Is this, I dedicate a year to this? Is this enough? This 1-page executive summary, 2 paragraphs, whatever it might be, enough for me to say, yes, I want to devote a year of my life to this. Okay. If the answer to that is yes, then also I need to say, oh, okay, if someone was to read this 1-page executive summary, or this 2-paragraph copy on a book jacket, would they want to spend their time that they'll never get back in these pages? And if the answer to both of those is yes, then bam, I'm all in. I come up with a title, come up with a theme, maybe build out that 1-page executive summary a little bit more, and then start turning that into an outline. And I get that outline about as robust as I can without it tripping me up. And that's the art part of it. That's the subjective part of it. Because if I come to say something and typically I do a prologue, a 3 parts, and an epilogue. Like that's kind of my, not every book, but in
that's your formula.
Most of them, yes, not all, but most. This one has more than that. But if I've on part 2 of that outline, I'm like, oh man, this isn't making sense, or how is this going to make sense? I can't connect this dot. I don't spend a day, I don't spend a week, I don't spend certainly a month worried about that. I just say, you know what, I have a year to do this. I'm going to figure it out. And I go over through that issue, and I keep going and get that thing as good as I can get it. And then I start turning that into the book, knowing that as I get to certain sections, I'm going to go deep dive into doing some research. I'm going to interview people about that topic. And as I do that research, and as I think through this plot, and as I get to know the characters a little better, most of the time through dialogue with one another, then I will figure out this problem. It's not like I'm on the battlefield and I have to make a split-second decision and people's lives are at stake. No, I can sleep on it. And you know what? If I write something and it's not that great, or it doesn't really make sense, I can come back the next day and I can fix it. Or I can come back a week later and I can fix it. So I guess it's taking a breath and not getting tripped up because I just can't figure out this one thing. Oh, I can't figure out this one thing in the prologue. And all of a sudden I've added a month to this process because I want to get this one thing right before I move on. Negative. I will keep going, and know that as I do this, I have a full year. I will figure that out. I'm confident in that.
I actually want to scan back as you're saying that, because a lot of guys might listen to this and they're thinking to themselves, well, I'm never going to write a book. I'm never going to be an author. And if that's not something you want to do, who cares? Like, no big deal. But there's a lesson in here that I think is applicable to whatever a man wants to do. And I've seen so many guys who they want everything just perfect. And then they go through and they're so rigid, so rigid in everything they do, that if at the slightest sign of inconvenience or a little fracture in the system, then they just crumble. It's like, no, adjust, adapt. Like, here's what you wanted to do. Life threw you a curveball. Maybe you had a new experience. Maybe you got hit with an injury or an illness or a bankruptcy or a lawsuit. And so, but just adjust, like mix it up, switch it up. And a lot of stuff will be unveiled to you. I think it's through our creator, but if you don't, that's fine. But a lot of stuff will be unveiled to you as you move forward, but you don't get to see it before at least you're putting some words on paper.
Yeah. So all those things you mentioned, that is just life. And sometimes people get down, especially in the age of social media, when you can see that 1-second snapshot of everyone else's day that seems perfect. And then you're taking these hits, you're just covering, you're like a boxer, you're just taking these hits and you're in that corner and you're covering up, and maybe you get knocked down and you're like, oh, that was brutal. And in the meantime, you're not seeing anybody else get knocked down because you're seeing all their successes. You're not seeing everything else. And even if someone's sharing a failure, it's in format like this, or it's the outlier, and it's fine because that people are failing and getting hit and stumbling and still getting up and moving forward. That, but you're not seeing it with all the inputs that are out there. So especially for kids, it's tough because they've now grown up with that. They didn't grow up with anything before and then get introduced to social media later and say, okay, I can put this in perspective because I know that this isn't real life. It's an advertisement, whether it's for an actual business or it's someone's personal feed, that's still an advertisement. for something. And it shouldn't be looked at as anything other than that. So yeah, life's going to hit you. It's going to hit you hard. And you get to decide also how you're going to get back up, because you can get up kicking and screaming, and you can get up whining and complaining and telling everyone how life isn't fair and how this happened to you and that happened to you. Or you can get up and inspire, because regardless, you got to get up, but you can get up and inspire those around you with the way that you get back up. Because getting up, hey, you have to. Eventually you'll figure that out. It doesn't matter if you spend a second on the ground, 10 minutes on the ground, a month on the ground, 10 years on the ground, 20 years on the ground. Eventually you'll figure out that you're going to have to get up and move forward. But then you get to decide, oh, I get to decide how I do this. I can whine and complain and make life miserable for those around me and make no one want to be around me. Or I can be an example to my circle, whether that's one person, 5 people, or in today's world, 35 million people, and get up and move forward in a way that adds value to their lives, because I can pass on these lessons, just like we did in the military, passing on those lessons to other units so they don't have to learn those same lessons in blood. And then we get stronger as a unit, as a team, as a country, and move forward that way. But yeah, that's called life.
Well, and it is definitely for other people, but even to break it down to the lowest common denominator, it's just for yourself. I think about it. If you wake up and your alarm goes off in the morning and you think to yourself, today's going to suck. And you start to like dwell on how bad the day is going to be.
Oh, that's such a horrible way to start the day.
Of course it's going to suck. Like even if it wouldn't have, you're going to make sure it sucks. Right. Or you could say, I've got some challenges I got to deal with today, and I'm going to address them and deal with them head on. And I'm excited to be able to work through these things. Same scenario, but the way in which you approach it, your attitude is really going to spell the difference between whether it is a good day or it's a bad day.
This is hilarious. I've not thought of this in, 95, 2005, 2015. Yeah, at least 25 years. And, I can't believe I never thought of this before, but remember Jerry Maguire? Remember, like somebody gets up, is it Jerry Maguire that gets up and he goes, today's going to be a great day or something like that. Like his mentor was talking to him. I haven't seen that movie in the same amount of time. I haven't revisited that movie, but I remember in Buds, like when we had to get up obviously so early, and anybody in the military has to get up early and go run around and do push-ups and pull-ups and all that to get yelled at. But I remember that movie had come out not long before I was in Buds and SEAL training. And I remember when that alarm would go off in the morning, throwing my legs over the side of that like metal cot bunk thing and thinking in my head that line from Jerry Maguire, today is going to be a great day. And I knew I was just going to go outside, totally dark, Pacific Ocean just crashing, and I was going to be wet, cold, hungry, and the verge of hypothermia almost immediately. But still in my head, I remember thinking about that Jerry Maguire thing and thinking, hey, today's going to be a great day. And and it was.
It's your mindset. Like we're all going through similar experiences. People tend to think that we live on islands and that, nobody's ever experienced what I'm going through. No, millions, hundreds of millions of people have gone through the exact thing that you're dealing with right now. And what might actually be the differentiator is the way in which you approach it, to your point.
Yeah, when you approach it, and then when you stumble or when you get hit, then you have another choice to make there, and you can make that same type of a choice and figure out, okay, yeah, I'm going to take this hit, but then now I get to decide how I deal with it, and how quickly I get back in the game and the way in which I get back into this game. So, and then as parents, of course, we have to think about what example we're setting for our kids, because they're looking to us for sure. Even when we don't think they're listening. That's why it was so important during COVID, especially in those early days of COVID. We didn't really know what was going on, like, let's say February, March of 2020. And the way that we talked about what was happening just in the kitchen, even if the kids were over on the couch or in the next room, I was very cognizant of how we framed what was going on. And I wanted them to hear, hey, we're prepared for this sort of thing. Hey, if there's no food in the grocery store, guess what? We're prepared for that. We have some food, we have water, we have fire extinguishers here if no one's on the other end of the phone when we call 911 if something like that happens. Of course we have firearms, plenty of ammunition, those sorts of things, and
hatchets.
I want to have a hatchet or two. So, I wanted them to hear it framed like that, because the exact same situation, now just flip it a little bit and have a husband and wife in the kitchen with the kids listening. They're a little unsure of what's going on. They're pulled out of school, and they're hearing, oh, I'm so worried if I'm going to have a job tomorrow. I don't know. We didn't save up enough money. I don't know what we're going to do. Can we pay for groceries? I don't even know if there are going to be groceries on there. What do we have on the shelves? So we have some cereal and a few other things. Oh, geez, man. And then now these riots start up, and oh, geez, what if they come to our house? What are we gonna do? Are police even gonna do anything? Or I don't even know what's going on. So the kids are hearing that. So same situation, but just flip it. Being prepared for something, or as prepared as you can be, as prepared as makes sense for where you live and your lifestyle and what you do and your level of training and all the rest of it, or that other one. So to those kids, that's a completely different experience. And I think it's important for kids to get the one rather than the other. They'll take lessons from both, but I think for kids, especially the young ones, to hear that, hey, my family's prepared for this. I see now what I'm supposed to do, rather than, oh man, I'm scared. My parents are scared. Geez, and more unknowns. So yeah, preparedness. It's just part of our responsibility as citizens.
When you're talking about that, I don't think for a minute, but I do want to be clear that you're talking about, that life is just rainbows and, sunshine and fairy tales. And that's what you need to communicate to other people, whether it's your employees or your children. It's like, you have to be realistic. And certainly with you and your wife, you might have real conversations about like, hey, hon, I'm worried about this, so here's what we need to do. But the way in which you frame it with your children might be different than the way you communicate it with a peer or a higher up. So I think there's some discernment there, and like, hey, we're not just going to pretend like nothing's happening and be like blissfully ignorant about the reality, but you got to think about who's hearing and who's picking up what based on your messaging.
Yeah. So I guess I was talking about what you did beforehand. So, okay, now let's take that same situation. You're not prepared and the kids are still, on the couch and maybe watching a little TV and you're with your wife in the other room. So now you're not prepared, but here's the same unprepared person. Another way to just think through this. Hey, we weren't as prepared as we could have been for this, but guess what we're going to do? We're going to make sure going forward that we're putting 20%, 10%, 5%, whatever of what we make each month away, so that we have that. So we have this buffer. Mm-hmm. And for our situation, I think it's a month would be good, or 2 months, or 3 months, or 6 months. You know what else we're going to do? We are going to make sure that our fire extinguishers work. Hey kids, let's go check this out. Look at these. Oh, the dates on this. Ooh, not quite right. Guess where I'm going? I'm going to Home Depot, or I'm getting online and I'm ordering a new one. And then we're going to go outside and we're going to do this together. I'm going to show you how to use this. So the first time you're using this, kids, isn't when there's a fire. And you know what? In the kitchen, we should probably invest in maybe some water and some food, just so that in case something happens, we're good and we have that, and we have a 2-week buffer, a 3-week buffer, whatever it is for your situation. So exactly same unprepared parent, but turning that into a positive, essentially. Like, let's learn from this. And it's not just that the kids are like, oh, I should have a fire extinguisher. It is, you know what? I can maybe make some mistakes and I can learn from them. And then I can take those lessons and apply them going forward. So I'm more prepared for the future. So I'm a more responsible citizen. That's what I can do so same exact situation of two unprepared people looking at it through a different lens and not sugarcoating it for the kids. So that's a different from the prepared person versus the not prepared person. Those are two unprepared families and different ways to frame it and move forward and have the kids learn and become better citizens because of it.
I'm glad you said that, because we actually have fire extinguishers, but I don't know that I don't even know that I or my children have ever operated a fire. We have them, but I don't know that any of us have even operated one. So I'm glad you said that, because I'm actually going to do that this afternoon. Like, yeah, man, we're going to go out, we're going to use up one of those fire extinguishers. Yeah, for sure.
Build a fire outside. So then you get to practice building the fire, which is awesome. And then you get to show, hey, this is how you put it out, So, hey, next time, if you need to, these are on, this room, that room, and in the car, garage, wherever. But now you know how to do it. And it's fun as well.
Yeah, I like that. I'm glad you said that. So to go back to the book writing process, because that's what we were talking about earlier, are you still going through DOD approval? I know on the first one you were. Do you even because you're not required to, I don't think, or are you, or what does that look like?
It's let's say, let's just say that I wanted to be safe on the first 3. And I submitted that first one. They took out 9 sentences. No Easy Day had come out not too long before. I mean, a years before, but still, it was still at the forefront of a lot of people in the military's mind, particularly in special operations. So I wanted to just make sure I was still close to being in the military. I was only a couple of years out, so I just wanted to make sure that I was doing the right thing. They took out 9 sentences. They were all ridiculous. Then I submitted the second one, and they say that they'll get back to you in 30 days in what you sign. And the first one they got back in 45 days, which I thought was pretty dang good for a gigantic.
That's decent.
Yeah, that's I was overjoyed. Second one, 1 month passes, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 7.
Really?
It was creeping up on 7. They finally got back with 54 redactions. It was like, okay, and that redaction could be a word, it could be a sentence, could be a passage, but 54 of them. And so now I have the attorneys tie each and every one of those redactions to a publicly available government document from the government. So not just a Wikipedia page or someone else's book or something that's in the public domain. No, it's publicly available government documents from our government that anyone in the world can download or look at. And so we tied each and every one of those things to that. Appealed. You have 6 months to appeal, 3 months, something like that. Gave it back to him. I won on 37. So even though all 54 were tied to something that somebody in China, somebody in Russia, somebody in Iran can go and look at and download, they still only let me win on 37. So then I unredacted them in the paperback. So this is the government at work for you. So I made up a completely fictional CIA black site in Morocco. And I'd been to Morocco before I went in the military. I had such a great experience there. I remember the sights and the sounds and the smells, and it made sense for the book, for my protagonist, James Reece, to go there from Mozambique. So it just made sense geographically. And so I made up a CIA black site. They took out every mention of Morocco, CIA black site, Moorish architecture, Atlas Mountains. They redacted all that. Really? And I won without appeal. So what does that tell us? Well, it tells us there's a CIA black site in Morocco.
There's something going on in Morocco.
Had they done nothing, no one would ever know. Had they just let me have a fictional thing. So ridiculous. Third one, I submitted that one again. They forget how many lines they took out, but they took out a few. Did that same thing, tied them all to publicly available government documents from the actual government, and then they wouldn't let me appeal. So I took that as, hey, quit bothering us with this fiction stuff, kid. We have actual nonfiction stuff to work on here. So that's how I took it. And so I didn't submit the last 2. And I had no touch points with The Devil's Hand, the last one on bioweapons and bioweapons research. I had nothing in the military, no touch points at all with that. So it was all research, just like a journalist would do. Reading as much as I possibly could, reading medical journals.
Publicly available information.
Out and interviewing people just like a journalist would, and put that all in that last novel. And then this one, I went deep into the quantum computing, artificial intelligence, mass data storage, surveillance of U.S. citizens. So I went deep down that rabbit hole. And I guess I'm curious if I had submitted it, what they would have taken out. But once again, no touch point with that in the military at all. So it's all stuff that I learned outside the military. And when you read books on that sort of a thing, essentially by the time you read that book, it's already dated. Even like a newspaper article or magazine article or journal article, it's already dated. So but you have to still do that research because it gives you the foundation from which to ask questions of people that are more current, that have touch points with that side of things. And then if you talk to enough people, you can piece together what's going on. So for people that read this, that read In the Blood, the part on the quantum computing and artificial intelligence, that's accurate as far as
legitimate information.
My research suggests that is highly accurate. And the people that I talk to who have current touch points with that world, they all told me, hey, we could tell you more, but it'll put your book in the science fiction category, which is, so it was much more frightening to research quantum computing and artificial intelligence than it was to research bioweapons and bioweapons research in the last novel.
Well, I think generally the public and the consumer would consider artificial intelligence, computer information to be more benign than bioweaponry, right? But it really isn't. That's the lull that we've been getting comfortable with, and it's just as, if not more dangerous and deadly than anything else.
Oh, it's incredible what how much information is out there, where it is, how it can be accessed, and the artificial intelligence part. Really, what that means is that that these this and if anyone hasn't looked up quantum computer, look it up and hit the images. It's amazing what I just thought it was a computer that maybe might be a little bigger than my laptop.
Yeah,
No,
bigger or faster or something. Yeah.
completely different animal. It's a lot faster, but it is a completely different animal. So check it out. It's crazy the way I describe it in the book. I had a great time figuring out how to describe that for someone who hadn't seen one before. So yeah, it's crazy. And here in Utah, those we have these droughts and all that sort of a thing. Well, there's a ton of water diverted to cool some essentially gigantic hard drives out there in the middle of the desert out here. They're collecting
In
something.
Utah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow.
You know, they're talking about the reservoir. We needed water for, yeah. Yeah. I forget the exact percentage, but people can look it up. How much water is diverted to cool those things. And what is that? What are those collecting? Well, they're collecting this. It's collecting everything that we're doing electronically, the Internet of Things. It's it's very interesting. I guess that's the best way to put it.
It's such a double-edged sword because I see it and I can see both sides, and you have this quote unquote ministry of truth that we hear about now, right? With Department of Homeland Security.
Wow.
What's the guy's name? The head of the Department of Homeland Security, Merrick,
Oh,
or I can't remember his name right offhand.
yeah.
But
No.
he is on record as saying, "Oh no, we're not collecting information on Americans. Like we're looking at
Let's see
quote unquote
here.
Russian disinformation." And I would actually, without knowing too much about it, say that's probably halfway true. Like you're collecting Russian and foreign disinformation, but come on now, we all know that you're also collecting American what you would consider disinformation.
Oh yes. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And I mean, I mean, going forward, when we're talking about things like the First Amendment, we're talking about this surveillance of U.S. citizens and how much data is appropriate for the government to have, and what collaboration there is between private companies and the government, what kind of influence lobbyists have on politicians, and what influence
Mm.
politicians can have on tech industry giants, essentially. I mean, it's uncharted territory, and this next decade is going to be very telling for the future of our nation when it comes to privacy, when it comes to what something that used to bond us all together as Americans, which was that First Amendment. Regardless of what you thought of the Second Amendment, regardless of what you thought of other issues out there, we used to all stand together and stand up for your right to say something, especially if you disagreed with me and we were at odds. Like that was the thing that made us Americans. And now we've lost that. Now that's been weaponized. Everything has been weaponized to divide us. And what does that division do? Well, it benefits certain people in society, not so much others. And that's certainly is not for the good of the country as a whole. It's good for politicians. It's galvanized bases, but it is not so good for the rest of us, and not so good for future generations. So this next 10 years is going to be very telling.
Is there any sort of, so for the first three books, you went through the Department of Defense and went through that. The last two, it doesn't sound like you did. Is there any sort of recourse options or risks on your end because you didn't go through that with the last couple of books? And what does that look like if it exists?
Well, I'm just taking it, them not letting me appeal as, hey, stop bothering us.
Mm-hmm.
So if something does come, it's right now, hey, that's why I have lawyers.
But what is it that they could, like, what is it that they could actually do? Like, is there anything, like, could the Department of Defense come in and say, hey, like you have to stop publishing this book, like your financial profits, like you can't, you have to relinquish those profits? Like, what is it that they could actually do, or can they?
Well, they took all the profits from No Easy Day. He was going to give those away anyway, but there's certain points and there's certain lawsuits out there. So some are actually pending about the Office of Pre-Publication and Security Review and the constitutionality of that. So there's some of those out there right now, but there are past cases of them stopping publication of certain books. There are past cases of them going after profits from a book and then stopping publication. So, it's the federal government. They can do whatever they can come after you for whatever they want. And there's a great book called 3 Felonies a Day by Harvey L. Silverglate. And it's absolutely fantastic. I think it was written in 2009, but it's even more appropriate for today. And what he talks about is that, hey, the average person gets up in the morning, maybe has breakfast with the kids, maybe drops them at school, goes to work, comes home, has dinner, tucks the kids in, goes to bed, wakes up and does it again the next day. And unbeknownst to him, over the course of that day, he has committed 3 felonies because there are so many laws on the books. The American Bar Association can't even tell you how many laws are on the books. And since, let's say, I forget the exact date, but let's say since the 40s, I might be off by a decade or so. But there's been a shift in how law is written. It used to be written for the quote unquote common man to understand. Now it is written so broadly that you have to have a law degree and you have to have arguments, and there can be differences of opinion about something that's written down. And that is by design, because that allows the federal government to go after you if they so choose. So there's a reason these laws are written so broadly today. And this book is fantastic at pointing out exact cases and building that case up. Because it's certainly a real thing. So 3 Felonies a Day is something I think every American should read.
Yeah, that's interesting. I thought about that. I haven't looked at that in the same context of law like you're discussing here, but I've definitely thought that about tax code, which I guess could in some ways is law as well. It's like, okay,
yes.
Like the fact that I personally have to hire a professional to navigate the tax code that changes every single year. Look, I don't think paying taxes is inherently wrong, like some people think. I don't think that we should not pay any taxes whatsoever. Like I get it. We've got a society. We've got to pay for the things that we have, including defense and some of these other things. Infrastructure and defense primarily. The rest can be questioned, but infrastructure and defense. But then I have to, at my own cost, be able to hire a professional to help me navigate and keep you people off of me and make sure I keep myself out of trouble. That's a ridiculous thing to me.
Oh yeah. I mean, I couldn't do it. I mean, there's no possible.
No, of course you couldn't.
The tax code. There's no possible way. So yeah, we have an army of people doing that now, which is crazy. That's totally outsourced. It's a whole industry, obviously. But that stuff is there by design as well, because. Right. Well, they can go through all of that, and then they can interview you. And what happens when you sit down with a federal employee and you open your mouth? Well, you have given them something called the power of opinion over you. So that's when I see all these people that are charged with lying to a federal FBI agent, or they always throw that on there. When you see anybody that's kind of dragged in front of the court, let's take Michael Flynn as an example, General Flynn. If you open your mouth to an FBI agent, to a police officer, you've given them the power of opinion to say, I think that person is lying. And so that is always, you'd be hard pressed to find a case where they don't put that on there, because all it has to be is, I just have to think that you are lying based off how I'm going to believe the person instead of you. What does that say? Now you're lying. Now I can drop that charge on you. So yeah, best to keep your mouth shut.
I'm not even aware of what'd you call it? The power of opinion? Is that what you called it?
Power of opinion. Yeah. Yep. So
interesting.
When you sit down there and talk. Yeah. That's what you've now done. So
yeah,
it's tough. That's why you always see it on there. Wow. It's always a charge on those sheets. They lied to lied to the FBI. So whenever I see that, I'm like, well, if you open your mouth, that charge is going on there. Essentially, if they're coming after you, there's no doubt.
Well, I know there's like you could perjure yourself, right? But to me, that would be you're factually, I can prove factually that you for example, lied under oath, but that's different than what you're talking about.
That's different. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about the money issue, one thing I've always been curious with you, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and these authors in general, is that you're talking about putting a book out per year. So when I hear that, I think, okay, well, he's got one payday a year. Now I know it comes in bonuses and advances, and you have, residuals and royalties from other books. But really at the end of the day, it's like, okay, no, this is my big paycheck. So for me, I get paid every week on products that we sell or events that we run or advertisements that we have. What is that like, where it's, hey, I'm going to work for a year and maybe I'll make a lot of money. Maybe I won't. Maybe this thing will flop. Like I'm going to spend money. I don't know if I'll make as much as I have to spend. Like, what is that like?
Yeah, I spend about 0 seconds of a year thinking about that.
Okay.
Yeah, so my wife channels all of that. That frees me up just to write, to create, to do these things, to do the business side of it too. And when I say that side, I mean like the marketing and the advertising and social media and engagement and thinking through creative ways to continue to build the audience. Thank that audience for taking a risk on me, that sort of a thing. So like that's where I want to focus all my energy. So as a team, she's got the other side, and I can't imagine trying to do that. That's a full-time job, just figuring out all that stuff, because what we just talked about with the taxes, that's a part of it. And so at that part, I'm blissfully ignorant of that. And maybe that's not the brightest way to go about it, but there's just not enough bandwidth in my head to create a book a year and be operating at this level and working on scripts and working on other projects. And at the same time, providing value to people, I hope, through my podcast, through any social media post. That's the goal, is to add value to someone's life, because once again, they're not getting that time back that they have trusted me with. So that's all my energy and effort. But mechanically, it's broken up into like signing a deal, turning in a manuscript, or exception, that manuscript being accepted, hardcover coming out, paperback coming out. So it's split up like that throughout the but so it's not just one big payday, and then there are other, you start juggling all this other stuff, just like you with other projects that are going on that support the books, like the podcast supports the books. I love talking to people. It's called Danger Close Beyond the Books with Jack Carr, so that so I can really talk to anybody. But in talking to those people and in reading their books, I also get some ideas, because maybe I wouldn't have read that person's book if I wasn't having them on the podcast. Maybe I probably would have bought it, put it on the shelf, maybe used it for reference, but I would have said, oh, you know what? I got to do this instead. I got to prioritize this over this person's book right now. But if they're coming on as a guest, it's like, oh, I have to read this book. Like I had Attorney General Bill Barr on the other day, and I was coming right off of SIG Freedom Days in Phoenix. And I thought, oh, I'll be able to read at night and take some notes when I'm down there, that sort of a thing. And oh my gosh, I mean, it was all day, every day. And it was crazy. I was signing books all day. People were standing in this like hot over 100-degree sun in Phoenix. And that was crazy. So I didn't want to take a break, because these people are waiting. And I don't be like, oh, hold on, I'm just going to go over here in the shade and like eat this salad,
read for an hour
for me or anything. Yeah. So it was like, even though the schedule like had a break in it, no, I just went for all 3 days. But that meant I had to read this entire book when I got at like late at night back in the hotel room, and I'm highlighting and I'm putting my yellow stickies in there, and I'm, I want to be prepared, because it's Bill Barr and he's sharp. so I was.
Oh, well, yeah, he's not a dumb man. Like, yeah. Whatever you think about the guy, he's not dumb.
Yeah, exactly. But in doing that, so I wouldn't have read that book had he not been coming on the podcast. I would have read it eventually, but I wouldn't have read it right then. And in reading it, I'm like, I got a couple little nuggets out of there. And whether that's a sentence that helps develop a character in this next novel, or it's I think I need to develop this storyline a little more, because this book, it was always in the back of my mind, but this thing really brought it to the forefront. And it's something Bill Barr was involved with in the 80s. And I'm like, that is really interesting. So that stuff, so all of that stuff helps. So my point is that it supports the books. Like everything else that is going on supports making these books the best that they can possibly be. And my goal is always to move the genre forward, even if it's just by a degree each and every time, and then also to improve and get better as an author, better as a writer each and every book. So that's what I owe myself and the readers who are trusting me. And that's always the goal. And good news is that this one for In the Blood, like Kyle Lamb, I saw him this weekend out there, former Delta guy who's fantastic, and it's his favorite one yet. And he would tell me, he would be blatantly honest with me. Yeah, he would let me know if he hated it. But he said it's his favorite one. Yes. So I'm like, awesome. Like that's one that really, really means a lot to me.
So I'm not asking you to disclose anything that's coming down the pike necessarily, but like at what point, and I'm asking this more generally and broadly, But at what point does James Reece die and the series dies, and then, you know, we evolve into the next line? Because I'm sure something like that is happening. And when do you decide that's the time to pivot? Because I mean, at some point, you're probably not going to write 20 books about the guy, right? So, like, how does that? Maybe you are. I don't know. Look, you're.
I'm not. 20 is a good number. But yeah, as long as people want to keep learning about James Reece, as long as I am fully invested in the story. I've heard stories of authors who come to despise their protagonist if they have a recurring character, because they feel like they can't branch out and be creative. And I do not feel that way at all.
Interesting.
I love writing about James Reece because I'm writing about a journey. I'm not just tied to this one person who is a carbon copy of what he was in the first book in each and every other book going forward. He's on a journey like all of us are, and he's learning and he's adapting and he's asking questions. Hopefully he's applying the lessons learned of past books and previous experiences to what he's going to do in the future. So I love exploring the world really through his eyes, and it's very therapeutic for me. For those who have read the novels, they'll know what I mean. Very therapeutic, because in real life you can't do some of these things that James Reece does in the books, but I can do it here in a
You wish you could.
And that makes it keeps me out of prison, which is fantastic. But I'm going to keep writing them as long as people want to keep reading them. And yeah, I just feel so fortunate that he has resonated with readers, because that's a rare thing. And yeah, I certainly don't take it lightly. But I want to do other things as well. So there's some other, I have a whole strategic plan. I just shared it with my agent a little while ago. But what that means is that some of these other things that take up bandwidth and maybe don't need to take up my bandwidth, maybe I can delegate those. Like the merch, it's finally out. We have a fulfillment center now taking care of the merch side of it, taking care of the customer service side and all of that. So that's off. A lot of the things with that Ironclad does with the podcast, like they're taking on more of some of like the creative stuff that I've been, although I can't really do very well, like the graphics and that sort of a thing, or just keeping track of things that I need to do throughout the year and the dates that are attached to those, and just getting organized in a way that allows me then to free up my bandwidth and not be worried about, okay, I have this schedule with the podcast, I have this schedule with my agent, I have this schedule for media with the publicist, I have my personal schedule with the family right here, I have this one. So 5 different schedules, that sort of a thing. So just getting more efficient on that side of the house so that I can explore some of these other things that I want to explore in addition to the James Reece novels.
Right. What is your take on ghostwriting? So what we see a lot of is we see a lot of authors who, you know, they're the author of the book, but they didn't actually write the book, or they have a quote unquote co-author and you don't really know who wrote what. Does that mean you shared a story and then the ghostwriter like actually converted the words to paper? And does that really mean you're an author? And I don't know that I have a perception one way or the other, but I've heard of a lot of prolific writers, fictional writers who they're no longer writing their own novels. And like, what's your take on that? Like, there's a lot of weirdness that I think we'll see more and more of with these ghostwriting opportunities and possibilities.
Yeah, and I heard before I stepped into the space, you know, people say, "Oh, you get to a certain level, and then someone else does it. You're sitting on the beach," and that's not what I've experienced in person. You know, John Grisham writes all his stuff. Stephen King writes all his stuff. That sort of a thing. From the outside looking in, I think it's convenient to just assume that when you get to that level, you just hire someone, and that's not what my experience has been. You see it more on the nonfiction side of the house, you know, where you have somebody like, you know, when does a congressman have time to write a book? That sort of a thing.
Right.
Does a mayor or a governor have time to write a book? You know, they don't. That's the answer. When did Barack Obama have time to write that book? And Michelle Obama have time to write that book? Well, I don't know. So I think you see it more in the nonfiction space.
That makes sense.
Yeah, if it happens in the fiction space, you see it more with somebody that might have started with a nonfiction, you know, like Richard Marcinko, and then he had the series of books, and then it's always like with like John Weissman on all his books, who says something like that. So that's much more common. So yeah, I think there are ways to do that. A lot of times you see people that are in the news that will partner up with somebody like Bill O'Reilly. The Killing series is a perfect example. You know, Bill O'Reilly with Martin Dugard, and so they work together. Bill O'Reilly's name is there bigger. Martin Dugard's is in there as well, but they're working together on it. And then, who knows how that all works? But there's plenty of Brett Baer does that. So nonfiction space, that is much more typical, and I haven't seen that in the fiction space.
No, that makes sense. I've always heard about that. So I wanted to ask, even with this next book I have coming out, I was approached and, I can do interviews with a writer and they'll write it all for you. And I'm like, well, I mean, I get the appeal of that, because I actually don't particularly enjoy the writing process the way that I think you do. So it would be more appealing for me than it would for you. But at the same time, I'm like, well, then that's out of integrity. Unless I'm giving that person credit and explaining exactly how this worked out, I can't tell somebody I authored a book that I didn't author. Now, they might be my ideas, but that doesn't make me the author of the words that are written on the pages. It's an integrity thing. And I'm not trying to judge other people. I'm just saying, for me, that just wasn't something I was willing to do.
Yeah, no, it's much more common. Like if you're coming out of a background, maybe you're not comfortable writing, maybe you're much more comfortable speaking or listening to audiobooks or whatever else, but you have an incredible story, or you have this lesson that you want to impart. Well, then probably it is wise to sit down with someone that can organize that and help you through that to get that story out there, because kids, especially, let's talk about like maybe a military experience that you had downrange or something like that. Well, sitting down to write a 100,000 page book about that might be a little intimidating, but it might be an incredible story, and you need to get it out. Maybe it's therapeutic for you. That's a part of that first person history that'll then be looked at by historians going forward as your perspective, as like the perspective of an E2, an E3, an E6, an O1, an O3, whatever it is out there on the battlefield. And maybe that person, you're not a writer. Maybe you despise, you don't like it, you're not good at it, whatever it might be. Well, then it's fairly common to then sit down with somebody, do phone interviews, have that professional writer put that into a format manuscript that makes sense, and then have an editor go through it and then get it out there. So typically that'll say, the person's name, whoever went through it, that experience, and then with so-and-so. That's typically how that goes.
Yeah. And so that to me, what you're describing, that to me is not disingenuous, because you're explaining the process, you're being truthful. But to say that you're an author, but you didn't author the words, that to me is where we start to get into this muddy area of like, okay, is that entirely accurate? And no, I don't, that's kind of where I come from.
Yeah. Not for like somebody like you that you need a deliverable, or hey, you're doing a leadership presentation and you have a great series of tenets around leadership, and you put it together and you write tenet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and it's what you do in your speeches. But you need that deliverable that's more than like a printout of the exact thing you have up there. Maybe you want to go a little deeper, but you just don't know how to get that out there. Well, giving those tenets to someone, talking to somebody that can help you then develop that deliverable for your tenets of leadership that you then get to share with a broader audience. That stuff's fairly common.
Sure. Yeah. So what is it like to see James Reece quite literally come to life? Because we know we've got the Terminal List coming up. I think that releases first part of July is it on Amazon? It's on Amazon, right?
Yep. 4th of July weekend, July 1st, it drops 8-part series, and Chris crushes it. It's
I'm sure he's an incredible person.
Such a great guy. Antoine, the director. Oh my gosh. I mean, he can't say enough good things about him. Obviously professionally as a creator and a visionary, but also as a person, like just top notch. It's just.
Did Remy work with you guys as well?
Yes. He was out there. I didn't see him on his scene. I wasn't out there for that one, but so many SEALs, so many military veterans. We had Max Adams, who's a former Ranger, who's a writer on it. We had Jared Shaw, who gave the book to Chris, and Jared's the only reason that this thing is getting made is because we served together, and he gave the book to Chris, and Chris read it and wanted to option it. So Jared was there every day. Max was there every day. Ray Mendoza was there every day. Ray Mendoza, another SEAL buddy of mine, who was he was in Act of Valor, the movie, and technical advising on Lone Survivor, and he has a company called War Office Productions where they help on military themed movies. But those three guys were on set every single day, and it would be a completely different show if they had not been involved and they hadn't been on set every day, and they hadn't been so invested in making this the best possible show it could be. So I'm indebted to those guys for sure. And then everybody in Hollywood was great. I mean, it was great to work with, it was great to me. It's a different show. I think I had so many people come up to me on set and say, hey, I've been involved in hundreds of these films and shows, and I got to tell you, there's something that feels different about this one. And then we talk about motorcycles, we talk about hunting, we talk about knives, we talk about Land Cruisers, just normal people. So I guess one of my takeaways was that how good everyone is at their jobs, and then how normal they all are. Because what we see from the outside looking in is you see the actor, the producer, or director get up at the Golden Globes or at the Academy Awards and, give some speech that is maybe a little disconnected for most of the country. But what I saw on set was just people working together at the top of their game. And this thing is like, it's a Lamborghini and it is flying down the road at over 200 miles an hour. And if one person isn't doing their job or isn't doing it at the highest level possible, then you have the ta-tink, ta-tink, ta-tink,
Sure.
Everybody had. That's why now I understand when people talk about the unions in Hollywood and why someone can't plug in a plug if that's not their job. Now I see why, because if they're doing that, they're not doing the thing that they're the best in the world at, that they've been hired to do. And everybody that's hired to do anything on the set was the very best in Hollywood. And that was pretty cool to see a machine running like that, and to see Antoine Fuqua at the top as like the commanding officer, setting that tone strategically, seeing Chris as the A-list main actor at the tactical level doing the same thing, and watching this machine run. And it was like a military operation. I mean, I walked on for the first time for the first episode, and Kraft Food Services is there, and they're feeding the troops. It's like the Army logistics training, feeding the troops. We have the explosives guy on set, and he's like the breacher in a platoon. You have the mobility guy moving all the vehicles, getting all the vehicles, the right ones. Just like in a SEAL platoon, you have the mobility guy in charge of the vehicles and making sure they're gassed up and ready to go. You have the armorer, just like in a platoon. It's checking out the weapons, checking them back in with the serial numbers, making sure they're all accounted for. Like that person's on set as well. And this just so happened to be a military centric scene. And it was like a SEAL reunion. And I walked on set.
Interesting.
Ryan Sangster is there. We were in Iraq together. So many great guys were on set and were playing SEALs. I think there were only two. There was not just SEALs. There were other military people there as well, playing SEALs. But I think Chris and Patrick Schwarzenegger were the only two that weren't military, that were playing military people. So that was pretty cool to see all of that come together, and then see what it looks like today. It's just awesome. I couldn't be more thrilled.
I don't know Patrick. I don't know Chris either. But obviously I'm more familiar with Chris's work, and it seems like he's somebody who, although maybe he didn't serve in the military, respects you, respects the military, respects the experts enough to fully embrace that role and to just become part of it because he wants to honor it in the right way.
Yeah, that was so important to him from the outset, so important to Antoine from the outset. And it was at the beginning, it was me and Chris, Antoine, and the showrunner. So a showrunner is like to a series what a director is to a feature film, because you have multiple directors and the showrunner is managing everything. So that was David Agilio, amazing guy. Our first conversation was in December of 2019, and we've talked every day since, to include early this morning. And he's just been fantastic. So we got together and wrote that first pilot episode. And by right, I mean, he wrote it and I was learning. I was just a sponge, and I learned so much. He mentored me through the entire process. I was advising on it. So we got this pilot script together, and then he took it with Chris and Antoine, and they took it to Netflix. They took it to Amazon. They took it to HBO, to Showtime, to Hulu, to Apple, and then it got in a bidding war, and Amazon ended up with it. So then you put the writers' room together, and so I advised on all those scripts, and then you start filming. And we started filming in March of last year. But kind of like in the military, you have a plan that sounds good from an air-conditioned tactical operations center or planning
Right.
space. And then you get out there and you're like, oh, geez, that hill isn't as big as we thought it was, or bigger than we thought it was. Oh, wait a second. Over here, this village is, we thought it looked like, by the satellite photographs, it looked like it was farther away. But man, that is right here. They're certainly going to hear us on our approach, or whatever it is. Things change and the enemy gets a vote. And same thing with this. You have a great script, and then you get out there and you're standing on the ground where you're going to film it. And you're like, oh, wait a second, this doesn't really work. So you adapt and you change it. And then the actors bring something to the role. They bring something different than maybe you thought they would when you're sitting in that air conditioned space. So now that has to be accounted for in future episodes as you're going. So these scripts are constantly adapting. Situation, terrain dictate. What is this actor brought to this role? How does that change? Episode 6, 7, 8. And so you're constantly working on these things throughout the entire process. And then it goes into post-production. So we film from March of 2021 to August of 2021, and it went into post-production until really a couple of weeks ago. And now we have the teasers coming and the trailers coming, and those things look awesome. And the whole show has, I think it's secret, so don't tell anybody. It is tested off the charts with test audiences. So yeah, just feel.
Nobody listens to this podcast anyways, Jack. So you don't have to worry about.
All right, good. I'm glad. Sorry.
What is it like when, so obviously you've got what you've written with Terminalist in the series, and then you've got writers who are going to take that information and translate it and make it available for TV, because it's a different skill set. What is it like when they take maybe more liberties with your interpretation of James Reece or the characters or the storyline than you would like? Like, how does that work when there's some sort of conflict there? And I imagine there was, maybe there wasn't. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you can't, knowing that you have, once again, that you have time, and knowing that is probably going to be the case, that somebody else with a different background, different history, maybe they want to put their stamp on it, and you're telling a story visually. You're telling a story through a different medium. So there are going to be changes. So I knew that going in. And then I also knew when I saw some of the scripts coming out of the writer's room, like, wonderful. We have months and months and months to morph this and change it if it needs to be changed. So I kind of took that approach to it, made my notes. I always gave my notes. Some I held back because you have to look at things holistically, and you have to work as a team, and you have to recognize that in order to work as a team, you can kind of derail things if you bring the wrong sort of an attitude to it. I guess that makes sense. But with the scripts, hey, you have some time. They do get approved and all that sort of thing. But guess what? You're going to make changes regardless. And those scripts are going to have to go up the chain again and come back down with notes. And you're just going to work together to get this thing where it needs to be. So I did also see how easy it is for something to go off the rails. And it's shocking to me that, one, that anything gets made in Hollywood, and two, that
I bet.
In Hollywood, because there are so many opportunities. There's so many people working on this thing. The team is so large that it is very easy. And I was always very forgiving when I saw something on TV that didn't quite look right. Fingers on triggers, scopes on backwards, that sort of thing. Very forgiving. Now I'm even more forgiving because I can see how easy it is for those things to happen. And, it's easy to snipe today. You couldn't say you watched a movie in 1985 and you really wanted to say something about somebody's finger on the trigger where it shouldn't have been. What are you going to do about it? You're going to tell your wife next to you and make her just roll her eye? Are you going to tell your buddy, and shut up, dude, I'm trying to watch, like, now what can you do? You can get on social media. You can be outraged,
pick it apart,
take a screenshot. You can tell your audience of 5 or whatever you have, you can make comment on someone's post that's maybe has more followers and say how horrible this thing was. And you can bring all that negativity to bear. And that can, that says much more about the person than about the project, because the project, oh my gosh, it's so easy. I can see that actor standing there, and for Chris, like, there's, say, hair and makeup's there, whatever, and they're putting the blood on his face and doing all this, and there's all helicopters are flying in the air, and you have like a explosive person over in the corner that's making sure that stuff is ready to go, and the standoff distances are appropriate for what you're doing. And then there's a guy standing next to Chris with that pistol or with that rifle, and he's waiting, and he's just waiting. And he's just waiting. And Chris finishes with all the makeup here, and the director is talking to him over here, maybe the technical advisors saying, hey, this, be sure you go, be sure you don't step out into that hallway. Be sure you pie the corner a little more slowly and come up, like all that stuff's going on. And then when it stops right before, that armorer will show Chris, hey, clear and safe, or hey, here it is. Here's the magazine. This is the type of round that is in there. So you need to be this far away. Chris confirms it. He looks, clear and safe, okay, or whatever that scene called for, and then boom, ready. So the last thing that he does is understand what the condition of the weapon is, and maybe it's just a shape. It could be just a shape, but that armorer will still say, hey, inoperable M4, You know, it just doesn't even work. So Chris will know exactly what he has. So that part was, I mean, super professional with all of that. But let's say all of that is going on, action, and people make mistakes. And what if they hand Chris something and what's that, scope's on backwards and he's not actually using it for that cut? He's just like coming around like this, but somehow it's on backwards because it fell off in another scene, or maybe the scope covers are on, or maybe so many things like that can go wrong. And then you're like, oh, reshoot it, or hey, we'll fix it in post. And then what happens? Maybe you forget to fix it in post, or
forget,
film
didn't
again.
take notes.
Guess what? Now everybody's on to other projects, and now someone is in that editing room that doesn't have a background in the military, has no idea that scope is on backwards, or that it should have been on there, but it fell off during the scene. But they're like, oh, this looks really cool. Let's put that in. So many ways to mess this up is what I'm trying to get at. So I'm even more forgiving now than I ever was before.
Well, and I think there's something to be said too for the consumer. Like, look, if you're going to put together a shitty project, that's one thing, right? Like if everything about the project is broken, okay, that's an issue. But if there's a couple of things that you're like, nah, that's not right. It would be a good exercise in discernment for the consumer to say, that didn't really take away from the movie. That didn't really take away from the plot line. We can nitpick it and all that kind of stuff. And, maybe they should have caught that, but like, you're going to be okay. Like, we're so sensitive. It's like, you're going to be okay. It's still entertaining. It's still enjoyable. And so just deal with it.
And there's some things like you just need some light in some cases in order to see what Chris is doing. Like you'd never step out like that. Well, you need to, like, okay, got it. Yeah. But you need to show, it can't just show a black screen. Like I need to show, I need to have a little light here, headlights there, or whatever it might be. So there are things like that happen that you just have to do to move the story forward. But to Chris and to Antoine, showrunner, to me, that authentic piece was so important, and keeping it dark and gritty and violent and primal, knowing that there were going to be changes, but those changes had to be rooted in that foundation of the novel, in the things that made the novel resonate with Simon & Schuster and resonate with readers. And so that had to be in place. And I know we accomplished that. So there are definitely differences from the book.
Of course.
But those changes, I think the surprises are good ones. And that someone who's a fan of the book, I mean, if you can go through it and be like, oh, no, that's different, horrible. That's one way to go about it. Or because there will be changes. I mean, that's just how it goes.
Of course.
But or you can say, oh man, that is an awesome surprise. That was really cool how they figured that out to show that creatively in this visual medium. So you can do that. And if you find it for the first time on Amazon on the video and then go back to the book, there'll be surprises going the other way as well. So I couldn't be more thrilled with how all of that came about. But but I also got to see how much work went into this. So once again, I'm so appreciative of anything that I see now, because I know how much work goes into these things and how much people devote to it, even ones that don't end up being quite so great.
Yeah. Well, Jack, I always appreciate our conversations. We didn't talk much about the book. I have an advanced copy here. We didn't talk much about the book, but I figured guys can go read it. Like, we could talk about it, or you could just go buy it and read it yourself, which is what you should be doing. But I would start at book number 1 and then work your way into book number 5, because it is chronological. But Jack, just always appreciate our conversations. So insightful. Always good to have these discussions. I appreciate you, brother. So you've got the book that releases May, what is it? 16th? What's
May
the
17th? Yeah, 17th. May 17th. So, May 17th, Tuesday. And I just dropped yesterday or 2 days ago the preface, prologue, and first 3 chapters on my website. So people can go there, hit the blog, and the 3rd chapter. So I did an audio sneak peek also, or sneak listen, that just went to the 2nd chapter. And then a PDF people can go read that has that 3rd chapter. And that 3rd chapter is probably my favorite chapter that I've ever written. And it's just a conversation between Caroline Hastings and James Reece. So Caroline Hastings is the matriarch of the Hastings family, and it's just a conversation between them. But it was the most powerful chapter and the most meaningful to me, and I think the best chapter that I've ever written. So, and there's no explosions, there's no one's getting stabbed in the eye socket, or anything like that. It's just a conversation. But so I wanted to make sure I put that up there. So if anybody wants to go check it out, they can go and check out those first 3 chapters.
Awesome. And then you've got Terminal List coming out on Amazon July 1st. So also,
Yep.
guys, be on the lookout for that. Follow along with what this guy's doing. Incredible stuff. I've appreciated our discussions and, more importantly, just our friendship that we've developed over the past 4 or 5 years now. Whatever I can do to support you, I hope you know you have it.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I always love talking to you, and hopefully we'll do it next time. We'll do it in person. Yeah, I want to talk to you about your next book that's coming out. I'm fascinated with all of that. I know it's a ton of work, and just love what you're doing, man. You're making an impact, and I certainly appreciate it. If more people did that, I'd be a little more hopeful for the future of the nation. Because yeah, right now when I sit down at the end, I try to remain hopeful publicly. When I sit down on the couch with my wife at the end of the night and have a glass of wine or whatever it is, it's, oh my goodness, I do have some concerns for future generations, but with you out there, man, it makes me feel all the better.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.
Take care.